Hi guys, I'm Sunny Chayes as usual, and I'm so excited to be with you guys yet again because we're moving into a new time, as we know, and it's so important to just get real. The time has come for us to get real. And one of the benefits of having my incredible guest today with us is to really understand elements of history, of American history, of human nature, and where we sort of come from and sort of how we're all the same, and how we can be adventurous and how we can really, really feel something new in our lives. And again, to understand history is so important because, again, we learn so much from that, sort of what to do and what not to do. And I am very, very excited to bring on a mythbuster, a historian extraordinaire, and an incredible, incredible novelist who has written this beautiful book I really, really love called Rendezvous. It is just an experience to be in for pages and pages and pages and many more pages. And I really, really respect our novelists we have today, and we're going to have an incredible conversation. We're going to go very deep. And so, Cody, let us bring on Geoff Spellberg right now. Let us do it. Hi, Geoff. How are you?
Very well. Thank you again for having me on the show.
I'm so excited for you to be here. I'm so glad that you took the time out of your busy schedule, being, again, a trial lawyer by day and an adventurer all the other time, and flying down from San Francisco. It's pretty groovy.
No, it's great. It's wonderful to see you. Yes.
Thank you. So what I was starting to say in the intro to my peeps out there, and you know, reading your book and feeling through our time and having our conversations, I think one of the things I'd love to chat about, just so our people can get to know you a little bit, is that adventure spirit that you have and the real experiences you've had. And by the way, guys, I am wearing a shearling coat for a reason in the studio because we are going to the Wild West, and we're going into the mountains, and we're really getting down. So that's why, we're ready. We're ready for anything here. You see the map behind us, and so it gives you an idea of kind of where we're going in our conversation today. And we were chatting so much about being adventurers and what that actually means. And we all have an adventurous spirit, I think. And the characters in your book, the way you have so masterfully woven them together, they're so real. Every character is so real. Let's chat about the importance of being an adventurer. Like, guys, let's just do it in our lives, even though we have computers in front of us.
Right.
So tell me, how you feel about that with you?
Well, I feel I'm an adventurer much more so than an attorney. I have traveled and knocked around the world and had close calls, amazing adventures since I've been 17 years old. And that spirit and that enjoyment is what I tried to bring into the characters that I have in my book. I have a young Shoshone woman who enters a new world, marrying into the fur trade in the Rocky Mountains. And the other main protagonist is a young Quaker boy who leaves home in Pennsylvania and goes to the fur trade because he wants the adventures. He wants to smell the wind and feel the sun and live wild. And so that's the spirit I brought to the book, Sonny.
Well, I think when you're discussing these two characters in particular, but every character in the book, I think, there's something about testing your mettle. Like when you're talking about Nate, like he lived a Quaker life. It was very safe. It was very predictable. And then there's something in him, like a tree that wants to grow bigger, that says, okay, I think I'm going to grow fruit now. I've had enough with the leaves. Now I want to be growing apples. He decided something was in him that said, I need to grow bigger. I need to bust out. There's something more that just something more in my life. And I don't think he even knew at all what he was kind of, signing up for, literally.
Right.
And all through the book, I feel that, he doesn't really ever know what he's signing up for. He has his trepidations. He is worried. He is scared. And he does it anyway. And that's, I think, what a true adventurer is, don't you think?
Right. It's being willing to take that leap
Yeah.
into the unknown, because it seems exciting and adventurous and new. And so Nate, that character, he's a Quaker boy. His family had a business. He could have stayed in the family business, but he read, and he liked to read, and he knew there was a bigger, wider world out there than staying in Pennsylvania and working in the wagon shop. And so he goes west, young man. He goes to St. Louis. He signs on with the fur company, and he meets Meliwa, who becomes the love of his life.
And we can see her if we like. The magical Cody is going to bring her forward for us. So that is her, and how beautiful. And what I love about these characters, too, is I have to keep reminding myself that they're sort of 17, 18, 19 years old, because the things they do for us in this modern day, I mean, our 17-year-olds, I don't think so. So it's really incredible. Again, though, I think... Again, with Nate in particular, he's a great symbol of that through the whole book, because, again, I don't think he really knows. When you say, go west, young man, and he's going there because he knows there's a bigger world, yes, but only through the books. He doesn't know it by experience. He doesn't have proof of it in his own life. He doesn't know how he's going to play. He doesn't know if he's going to live or die in the situations. And he does get scared. He does get petrified. He does get worried. And yet he does it anyway.
He perseveres.
Yeah,
he's
and I
frightened.
think that's so
he makes
cool.
mistakes. He's flawed. He like anybody, and yet he moves forward. He goes forward, and that's something I think is part of the adventurous spirit.
Yes, and I want to celebrate that. So that's what we're doing today, guys. We're celebrating that. That's why I'm the curious adventurer today, because I want to remind myself that there were times in my life when I was very adventurous, and then sometimes, things happen that scare us so much into complacency or into safety, which is complacency. And then we just sort of go along like Groundhog's Day. And, with COVID and stuff like that, there was a lot of Groundhog's Day there. And, and so for all of us to kind of reactivate our adventure spirit, our adventure, I think it's natural. I honestly do think that we all have it in us, and yet it's scary, and it just is.
And I think we all have to learn to get over that fear, that being afraid of the unknown, and just step out and then trust our instincts to adjust.
Yes.
And I felt that's what I did in the years I left home as a young man, long before the internet, long before cell phones. When I disappeared into Africa, for example, I wrote my folks a letter once in a while. And there was almost no way that they could contact me. And yet I went forward, and it was wonderful for me.
Well, and you did, like Nate, you sort of went with some idea that Africa was, the footing is not clear. You don't know what your journey is going to be. You know that you're stepping into the unknown, and yet little did you know how unknown it actually was. Again, like Nate in the adventures that he goes through. And so when you were in Africa, when you were arrested, tell us a little bit about that. But you didn't predict any of that. I'm sure if your parents knew, they would.
Well, they liked the story after I was out and finally got back home. But
tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I was deep in the south in Africa. I was down in a country called Malawi, and a war broke out between Kenya and Tanzania. Mm-hmm. And I needed to get back to Kenya. I had a plane ticket out of there. And so I had this brilliant idea as a 20-year-old that I could just slip across the border and nobody would catch me. And I did not get very far, and I was in jail for a few days in a small Tanzanian town. And I was interrogated several days because they were sure I was CIA.
Oh,
in fact, I was a dumb kid just trying to get into Kenya. And so it was a wild time.
I mean, that's one, and then you were, running with the bulls and almost got speared to death.
Oh, running with the bulls in Pamplona, right. And so this is a good example where I trusted my instincts, almost to my detriment, but I ran the very first day of the festival, never having seen it before.
Oh, my goodness.
And as the bulls approached, I jumped up on the barricade at the wrong place. Oh. And what saved my life is there was a Spanish guy sitting a little bit above me, and he reached down and he pulled me up. And it turned out where I had jumped up was where the bulls smash into the barricade before they make the sharp right turn that leads them into the stadium. And so you can imagine, I knew in a split second he had saved my life because I was holding on for dear life as the bulls, probably, I don't know, 6-8 tons of bull, were slamming into the barricade below me. And we were shaking like this, and I just didn't want to fall off. And I knew he had saved my life. And,
oh, my gosh.
But I had just trusted my instinct. And fortunately, I had a guardian angel who came in the guise of this Spanish guy. I'll never forget his face, and he saved me.
And there is that. You know, I think that when people, one of the characters, one of my favorite characters in the world is a cartoon character called Mr. Magoo. And if any of us are old enough to remember Mr. Magoo, I've actually taught classes in spirituality about Mr. Magoo, because what was so cool about him is this beautiful naivete that he had. And it's also a trusting, and it's also a knowing, and it's also seeing with his eyes where he couldn't really see very well, and seeing things in a certain way that were always beautiful or magical or in his favor. And he would walk along. Remember, guys, he'd walk along, and then we'd see the building that would be falling, and then all of a sudden a 2x4 would go whoosh, and he would walk across the 2x4. Or he'd see a mop in the corner, and he'd say, "Oh, good day to you, my dear. You are so beautiful today." You know, or he'd see an oil spill on the ground, and he would say, "Oh, little fishies, are you having fun in there?" And I always loved Mr. Magoo, because I thought, who's to say? You know, I mean, yes, other people can look and see a mop or a disaster or oil on the ground, but who's to say what's real and what isn't? And that was his reality always. And I thought, gosh, you know, if we go through life like that, and in some ways Nate went through life like that, in the way that he was aware, and you did, you know, where you were semi-aware that you were taking a bit of a chance, but not fully knowing. And again, in our lives, if we ever really know what's going on, we probably wouldn't get out of bed sometimes, you know, and just want to skip over 2 weeks, like that Green Day song, "Wake Me Up in September Ends," you know.
Right.
So, yeah, I feel your chatting coming on.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I feel that's sort of, it gets down to trusting your instincts. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's something I learned in the year that I was in Africa when I was traveling around, that I would get up, I had no idea where I would sleep that night. I had no idea what adventures I might run across during the day. Mm-hmm. And more than once, I went to bed at night in Africa thinking, like, what an amazing day. I can't believe that all happened. And I don't think it would have if I didn't trust my instincts and just step out and go forward to try to visit the places I wanted, do the things I was intrigued to do.
And also it is, I think, again, with the Mr. Magoo vibe, is sort of trusting is trusting others, you know, trusting our instincts, yes, and trusting our way in the world, trusting their spiritual things, I could say, trusting hope, trusting our human, you know, our fellow man, trusting the goodness in other people, our humanity that we share, those kinds of things. And so I sort of go through life that way, and I do feel like I've been having people around me sometimes who are quite cynical, and I think, you know what? Yeah, there have been times where someone may have ripped me off, or something didn't go perfectly, but I would rather do the Mr. Magoo thing than be cynical all the time and think everyone's out to get me. So, right? You know, yeah.
And I think that vibe is a big part of Rendezvous.
Yeah.
You have Nate and Meliwa, who, I mean, you make a good point. They're really just teenagers. Meliwa, I think, is 17 in the book. Nate's maybe 19 or 20, and they're just teenagers, and yet they're deep in the Rockies. They're in the fur trade. They have to make because of interesting events in the book, they end up in New Orleans for a whole season. And so they're in 1834 New Orleans. Here's a Quaker boy in New Orleans with a Shoshone woman who's never been out of the mountains, and they have to learn to make their way in New Orleans, the wildness and licentiousness of New Orleans, and they learn and they grow from it.
And the languaging thing, you know, you guys know I'm always chatting about words and the power of words and the power of language and the power of communication and the importance of it and the love of it and the joy of it, and again, the importance of really using it in a way that's deep, true, real, all of that. And I was so impressed and happy, actually, that Meliwa really learns bits of English more and more, and so that she's, again, so young that she can kind of, do that so easily and effortlessly in a way. And then she really can be part of both worlds, and she really goes back and forth quite smoothly, I think, and not everyone can do that, but your character does. And why do you have her be like that? Is there something about her? Is that a dream of, it's because, again, not everybody can do that. I think it's very beautiful and not what do I want to say, rare. That's the word I'm looking for.
I think it's a function of somebody who is not afraid of the world and somebody who's not afraid to learn. They'll go somewhere new. They'll try new experiences. They're willing to leap into something and learn from it and grow as a character.
Yeah. There's a bit in this book, and at different times you guys will see the cover, and then we're also going to talk about our wonderful maps that we have behind us, because this is sort of the whole backdrop, which is why we have them, to this story. And again, I sort of love it. I mean, it's a lot of pages, and I like that because it's a situation where you can really just be in this world. And again, I love the descriptions. I think you did a beautiful job of just literally painting and creating the sights, the smells, the aromas, the water, the ocean, and not the ocean so much, that comes later in another book, which we'll be talking about, the trees, and then the vibe in New Orleans and stuff. And I want to read for you guys a bit from this book. I really love this book, Rendezvous. This is a moment, actually you might set it up in 30 seconds. I'm reading the bit about when Nate saves.
I know where you are. So, yes, so without giving too much of the story away, Meliwa marries into the fur trade, marries a trapper, and it doesn't go so well. And she's in winter camp, and Nate is also, by chance, in the same winter camp. Meliwa is badly injured, and she and Nate have to leave the camp. And as they set out in the wilderness in the middle of winter, a big storm is coming in. And Nate is still learning his way as a mountain man and is not completely comfortable and completely safe in the wilderness. Yet he's already fallen in love with Meliwa, and this is the scene that you're going to share here.
Yeah, and I do want to say something else about Nate when you say they have to leave. Actually, Nate sort of takes it upon himself to just do it. Like there's a moment where it's sort of that Dorothy, going left or going right. They could have stayed. It could have gone a very different way. But Nate sees an opportunity and seizes the opportunity to just whisk her up and whisk her out. And again, not knowing what's going to happen, where they're going to end up being, how in the world they're going to, is it the frying pan into the fire, or is it really safety? He really doesn't know. I mean, there's no way he can know. So he just feels it and he does it. And this is a moment that I think is so beautiful. So I'm going to read this to you guys. Night had given way to morning. Although with the low gray skies and snow flying, it was difficult to tell. Nate was watching May as she slept, wondering if he should wake her to feed her more stew. At the moment, Meliwa was caught in a dream where she was walking along the knife edge of a mountain pass with a drop, certain death, just a few feet from the path. She walked as carefully as she could, but kept feeling the pull toward the yawning chasm. It took all her focus to walk the path, and she struggled forward. Suddenly, she stepped into a green springtime meadow, and the path disappeared. She cried out in pleasure at the surprise of this stunning meadow and woke up. Her first sight was of Nate, leaning over to tend the fire. She was puzzled why she and Nate were at this fire together. Shifting her position, she felt a stab of pain, and the awful memories came flooding back. Peter's fist, the kick that killed her baby, and driving the knife with all her might into him. She wondered if she had killed him. Nate turned around and saw the consciousness had returned to her eyes. He smiled and sobbed with happiness. Oh, it gets me. May, oh my God, you are back, you're alive. Meliwa was puzzled by his tears, but the openness and love in his smile touched her deeply. She managed a weak smile. Hi, Nate. You make fire? Oh. Yay, applause we must have. It's so beautiful. And again, it's that, they just didn't know. They just literally left, didn't they? I mean, they really did.
They left in a big snowstorm, pounding into the Rockies in the winter. Mm-hmm. That's one of my favorite scenes in the book, where the two escape and make their way.
It's so beautiful. Again, the idea of being an adventurer and feeling into our own personal power. I think that there's so much of that in this book. I mean, there's so many wise people, but then also there are many, many. I would like you to talk about it a little bit, about a little bit of the history and a little bit of the. Just go for it.
Sure. The history of the story is the name of the book is called Rendezvous. And Rendezvous was a interesting event in American history. It lasted only for 16 years, and very few people have ever run across it. I ran across it by chance, and when I did, that's why I thought, geez, this would be a wonderful opportunity for a story. But what occurred is every year in the early summer, the fur trading companies would rendezvous with the fur trappers deep in the Rocky Mountains, and they would trade the pelts, for whiskey and goods and money and so forth. Yeah, but Rendezvous ended up resonating with the mountain men. They loved it. It was a chance to socialize and everyone to get together, and the Native American tribes would come as well. And so these events, which the first one, lasted only a couple of days and didn't involve that many participants. By the heyday, when I've set Meliwa and Nate, Rendezvous had 1,000 people appearing deep in the Rocky Mountains, and there'd be Native Americans coming to trade and race horses. The trappers would court and sometimes marry Native American women, and it was an amazingly egalitarian event because Native Americans stood on the same plateau as the mountain men. And if you were a mountain man, it didn't matter if you came from a wealthy family, and had education, or you were as poor as can be, or an escaped slave even. You were regarded based on your ability to thrive in the wilderness, to engage in the mountain man work, to tell a good tall tale, to ride a horse. I mean, it's a wonderful chapter in American history, and I was astonished when I read it because I read about it because I had never heard of it, and as I say, I thought it would be a fantastic backdrop for a story, and that's how we ended up with Rendezvous.
Well, and what you're talking about, too, boy, I'm getting all into it now. And at some point, this coat's coming off, but it's very fun for the moment. Again, the egalitarian, and again, I myself love to be sort of the myth buster, and so I'd love to bring stuff to you guys, information and facts and ways that mainly ways people live together in peace that we may not know about. That's, as you guys know, sort of my thing. So the idea that it's really, it's not the money, it's the actual, what do we have today? What can we do with you? How can we play? How can we benefit each other? Being an amazing horse rider, all of these things that you're saying, it's like that is the character of each person as they come to something. And I think, again, it's just so fun and great to be anywhere where people are sort of let everything else go, their family, their history, their whatever it is, and whether it be king or pauper, sort of a thing, plebeian or prince, and everybody plays together nicely.
There's
adds, right? And learns and adds and grows and all that, right?
There's a wonderful character in the book who's actually, in the book there's a number of historical characters. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard of Kit Carson or Jim Bridger. They used to attend Rendezvous, so I have them historically correctly set in the book. And one such historical figure was a fellow named Jim Beckworth. He was an escaped slave. He had struck one of the overseers and headed west. He knew that he couldn't hang around the South anymore, and he ended up in the fur trapping world, and he was considered one of the strongest, most vital mountain men. And yet he came from one of the toughest backgrounds, and he was regarded the same as anybody else, and not more so, and more so because of his skills and ability. And it's wonderful.
Well, again, I love that. And that's what I really love about this book, too, is it's dreamy and you sort of can really just dive into it and stay there with a nice, latte or cup of tea, whatever, and just be with it for, quite a while, luxuriate in that world, in your world, in this world, in this historic world, which is something that was. And we love to feel our roots sometimes. I think it's such an important thing for us as humans at this point. Again, with COVID and people making sourdough bread and stuff, it was like interesting what we chose to do. And also when 9/11 happened, there was a lot of kind of nesting that went on.
Mm-hmm.
People didn't buy clothes. They bought couches and TVs and pillows and things
Right.
like that, rugs, yummy stuff that are
Right.
around the hearth, around the campfire. And I think there's something very, very natural in our psyche, in our humanity, to be around the campfire, wherever that may be in our world, and be adventurers and go out in the world and do that kind of thing, and then gather back at the campfire. And so I think that your characters do that so beautifully, this sort of expanse and then contract, expand and then contract, and then expand more and then come back.
Right. And that happens. I mean, both Nate and Meliwa grow, I like to think, grow noticeably in the book as their world expands, as they become more confident in where they live and who they are. You see that in those characters, which is hopefully what all of us are doing as we experience life.
Well, yeah, and there are many other really cool characters like this story. Again, it being over 500 pages, there are a lot of people in this, and there ends up it's lots of political stuff and sort of war stuff. Who's what? Just a huge story. It's actually kind of a mega story,
Right.
in that way, and it takes a bit of time and stuff. Meaning it covers a fair. How many years does this cover? Actually, I wasn't quite
3
sure.
years. It covers 3 years, so
wow.
it's three
Jam-packed.
They attend 3 separate rendezvous: the 1933, 1934, and 1935 rendezvous. And so I've set them in their correct locations in those 3 years. And some of the events that I've written about in there actually occurred during those rendezvous. And then I have the characters. It's more fleshed out as opposed to reading just a sort of a bare bones history.
Not at
I've
all.
fleshed out what the characters are doing.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
speaking of fleshing out characters, I love the character of Meliwa as a female. There's certain things that start to happen, and I think, oh, whoa, I don't want more of that. And then you luckily let us not have to take that very dark road, and we get to go a little bit over here, and then it keeps going, but it's also
Right.
like I appreciate your choices a lot. I appreciate them a lot. And where does Meliwa come from? Because she feels so real.
Well, it's a great story. So let me tell you.
Well, thank you, because that's what I do. That's what we're up to here.
So I have to start back a little bit. My wife is Vietnamese, and we met in Saigon, and this was yet another example where I sort of jumped forward into the world and just by chance met her in Saigon.
Did your Mr. Magoo thing.
Did my Mr. Magoo thing, met my wife, Mai Lee. And when I was writing this book, I wanted to have a female protagonist as the lead. And yet, obviously, I'm not a woman, so I had to think, well, how would a woman react in this situation, or what would a woman think? And so I invariably defaulted to my wife, to Mai Lee. And we weren't married at that time, but my girlfriend, Mai Lee. And I think, well, how would she handle this, or what would she think? So as I wrote the book, I captured a lot of her spirit and energy in it. And it's very funny. Most of my friends have read the book, and when a number of them have met Mai Lee and said, "Oh, I know all about you now. I've read the book."
That's so great. One of the aspects and qualities of our life that we're living, and my life that I'm living, is about honor and respect. It's very important to me, and I like to think I do everything I can in that, and that's what I appreciate that I feel that you've done with a lot of the characters in this book, and Meliwa in particular, because I feel like I appreciate her honoring of her ancestry, of where she is, where she's going, wherever she is, whenever she's anywhere. She seems to be very, very cool.
Yeah.
She's very honoring of the situation. She's very wise beyond her years. She seems to really like we say these days, read the room. You know, she knows how to move through, in my humble opinion, in a very gracious and honoring way. And so I'm happy. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, good. Well, yeah, I hope I've done my wife right by the way I've
think
drafted
so.
the character.
Yeah. And I think it's a great way, because she isn't just anything. You know, she's very multidimensional and stuff like that. And that's why I appreciate that she has a lot going on. And again, you know, the honor that we at this point are learning, I think, more and more about just people who are not like us necessarily, that we think are not like us. And again, back to the rendezvous concept of the egalitarian, you know, everyone has something to offer, or maybe they don't, but we're going to accept the concept that most probably they do, and allowing the flow of that. You know, here are my gifts. What are your gifts? You know, kind of thing. And I think I would love to walk through my day and have all you guys walk through your day and have all that all the time. Wouldn't that be nice? Isn't that a good prayer?
Well, you know, I appreciate your comment about the interesting characters. There's one in there that there's many, but there's one I think is worth mentioning as well. It's the Warwick Chateau, who's the voyageur. The voyageur were the French Canadians who were involved in the fur trade. And he was a man who suffered a horrible tragedy when he was young. He fell completely in love with a Blackfoot woman, married, integrated into the tribe, and she was unfortunately murdered on a hunting expedition. And it tore him to pieces, and he hated. He lived by hate. And his masters, the Hudson Bay Company, were trying to take advantage of that hate and turn him for their purposes. And he evolves, in fact, from his relationship with Meliwa, who treats him with kindness and, you know, understanding about what he's been through. He changes in turns, and I've always liked that character in the book. And it seems it's its natural progression, and then he ends up saving her in a tough situation, ultimately.
Well, you bring up a point that I think is really important to this discussion, which is the expansion of our consciousness in the way of reading, traveling, allowing ourselves to be in communication, in contact with people we might not ordinarily be in contact with. The conversations, you know, many people have had conversations with, let's say, the Republicans and the Democrats, or the blacks and the whites, or the whatever that might be, or gay and straight, and being able to have just a person, you know, to personalize something where we have a hate that we have, you know, that because there might be a circumstance that may have actually created that. But that was an anecdotal, like in this character's case, that was an anecdotal situation that happened to him. But it doesn't mean that all Shoshone are, you know, the devil.
Right.
And yet because he had such a pain about a specific situation in his life, all Shoshone were the devil. And then he was able to, again, by just allowing himself, because part of it is us allowing. I mean, Meliwa can be as beautiful and as amazing as ever she is. If he doesn't let that in, if he doesn't do a bit of that dance, if he doesn't let go a little bit, to let a little bit of her, you know, beautiful appreciation and grace in, then it doesn't happen. So I think that's something that we all kind of work with these days. Don't you guys think? We do, I think, don't you? And I think we can work with it more.
I agree completely. And I think he's a wonderful symbol in the book about doing that, about getting beyond whatever your past prejudice is, or your past anger or bias, and moving forward and opening up.
Yeah, and just, you know, give peace a chance. Give people a chance. And we were talking about honoring, and another thing that I always feel about any other, and indigenous people, as you guys know, I'm working with the Bushmen. Not working, that's not the right word. Gathering with the Bushmen is a better way to say it. And again, guys, it's our words, you know? Like, we don't have to do almost anything except breathe, but we get to do a lot of things. So if we change that, we have to do the dishes till we get to do the dishes. It shifts our whole feeling about that, you know? So anyway, just a tip. Change have to get, and see how much cooler you feel about kind of everything, and gratitude, like, you know, flows out of you. I want to chat a little bit about our Marie Laveau, with the interesting about, the voodoo and all that kind of stuff that, of course, comes out of Africa, and how it kind of plays in the Americana undercurrent a little bit.
Oh, sure, and particularly in New Orleans. And so voodooism was a religion from West Africa, came over to the Caribbean, as slaves are brought over. And it really found a home in New Orleans. And one of the most famous, probably the most famous practitioner of the voodoo religion was Marie Laveau, who lived in New Orleans, historically correct time period as when Nate and Maliwa were there. Mm-hmm. And Maliwa is intrigued with her, and they become friends. Maliwa understands the magic of nature and the spiritualism of the mountains and, the magic of the streams flowing. And she's drawn to Marie Laveau's mysticism and voodoo, and they become friends and are in the book.
And again, with the ancestral pull that Maliwa has for her ancestors who have passed away or gone to the other world or whatever that might be, and what that may mean. Are they accessible? Is it in a dream? This sort of thing. I mean, and there's so much about that, sort of the Day of the Dead with the Latin people connecting. And of course, we know about the importance of honoring our ancestors no matter what, And so I love this bit. So I'm just going to read this little bit to you guys because I think it's really cool. Maliwa spent much of the season with the high priestess of New Orleans, Marie Laveau. One day, while Maliwa had been looking at magic amulets being sold in Congo Square, she was invited by Marie to visit the voodoo's Queen Cottage on St. Anne's Street to view even more magical charms. Maliwa was entranced by the smells and magical power of the house. She was amazed at Marie's giant python named Zombie, which Marie often used in various rituals. Maliwa was also touched by Marie's kindness toward the less fortunate citizens of New Orleans. During the horrific yellow fever epidemic a few years earlier, Marie and her family had cared for dozens and dozens of dying citizens. As the two became friends, Marie invited Maliwa to participate and assist in the rituals Marie provided for clients. These were designed to address almost any problem or desire, such as to ward off illness, success at business, find a husband, or shed a cheating spouse. They were all provided by Marie for an agreed-upon price. She was the most successful voodoo queen in the city, because the rituals and magic charms that she provided were always tempered with practical advice. And so it seemed to desperate clients that the voodoo magic was working for them. Plus, Marie worked part-time at a hairdresser for wealthy white clients and picked up significant city gossip, which she used to her advantage. It's like, well, yes, like what? Use it all, girl. But I loved that in the book because I didn't actually know about her, to be honest, to show my, my ignorance in that area. I mean, I knew about voodoo and all of that. And, of course, white magic, black magic, all these kinds of things, and the power of that. But again, the power of the honoring of the ancestors, I think, is a very, very significant theme. I mean, even in our lives today.
No, and that's right. And we all do it. It's appropriate. All societies do it. The Shoshones absolutely did it. And so, and Maliwa, of course, honored her parents.
Yes, right? Yes. And I want to chat a little bit more about your amazing life. And when I'm thinking about, again, the Groundhog Day that a lot of us feel, and honestly, I don't know if you've had this experience, that people are feeling coming out of COVID and stuff, that they sort of have lost a lot of their passions. They're sort of in this place of like, okay, now what? Sort of whatever people were doing before kind of got put on pause. Some people really took it as an ashram, a quiet center, a place to just be, again, quiet, settle down, do, creative things. And others really found it difficult. And I'm aware, I mean, I had a great time with it, but I'm aware that many people did not. And so at this point coming out of it, I feel like we really can create something new no matter whatever age we are. And we can create an amazing life for ourselves. And it's not necessarily about money, or it's not necessarily about external situations, actually. And so I feel like you have really created an amazing life. And one thing I want to say about that is about the humility. And you and I have in common the opportunity, or had the opportunity when before we were 21, to be able to be in other places and understand the beauty of America and what America does offer us, and that there are many other ways of doing things and being and speaking and eating and setting a table and riding on the street. And so that humility and that kind of a expansiveness that we have is there. And then also the humility, and then can we activate a bit of Nateness? We'll use Nate as a verb and a noun and a
Yeah.
So I'd like you to chat a little bit about how you feel you are now, and how, like, that sort of, like, how you can tell our peeps a little bit about how to activate our adventure.
I don't think it's much different than what I've been talking about before. I mean, I still love the thrill of going somewhere new. I love the adventure of going somewhere new. Just last week, I was telling you I was in Laos, and we went to an island on the Mekong River, deep in the Mekong River. I felt it was a bit of heart of darkness. We had to go on a small little boat, and there were no vehicles on the island, and we were in this hut on the river, and it was just magical. It's an area on the Mekong that is famous for waterfalls, which is why we went. And it just felt so wonderful to be out in the world again. The smell of Asia, the feel of the humidity. It was just magic. It just felt so wonderful to be back out on the road. And I think, we've been talking about travel for quite a bit, but it doesn't necessarily have to be travel.
Not
Your
at all.
adventure. I mean, writing Rendezvous was a big step for me. I'd never written a book before, and so I thought, well, it's going to be an adventure and a challenge, and I was excited to take it on, or almost anything to do that.
Well, and you decided during COVID, for some strange reason, to be jumping into the bay in San Francisco and swim. And so, and you're not 12. I mean, you did it at another age. And so and you swim it, like, you do it. And you do it. Do you do it every day or a couple times a week?
I do it, probably a couple times a week. I've been a competitive swimmer my entire life. Always afraid not afraid, but uninterested in swimming in the cold water in the bay. And during COVID, all the swimming pools closed, and all my swimming buddies said, well, you swim in open water or you don't swim at all. And so I started swimming in the cold water. I started with a wetsuit, which I have to say is frowned upon. You're considered a bit of a wussy if you wear the wetsuit. But I worked my way up so that I could swim without it, and I joined one of the swim clubs right on the bay there, and I swim a couple days a week. And in the morning, sometimes the sun's coming up and the light's reflecting off the Golden Gate Bridge, and it's red and golden, and you just can't imagine a better morning. And then go have a cappuccino and feel like a king for the rest of the day.
And so, of course, you're talking about something a lot of people are doing these days with the cold plunge. That's like the new rave, even though in Norway they've been doing it for like 1,000 years.
Right.
But anyway, whatever's new is old again, and old is new, and all that. What I'm hearing you say, and what I'm thinking about when you're chatting, is I'm thinking about creativity, I'm thinking about purpose, I'm thinking about doing something new, again, at any age, at any time, wherever we are, whatever's happening, whatever we have at our disposal. Again, I think about a tree who grows and gets to a certain size, and then it doesn't just say, okay, that's enough. I've gotten past the soil and I have some stuff going on. It's like, okay, I'm going to grow higher. I'm going to grow bigger. I'm going to grow taller. I'm going to grow more leaves, 100,000 leaves. And then I'm going to say, okay, this season I'm going to grow peaches. Like, how cool is that? Because now I have food for the squirrels and all the animals that can come and land on my branches. It's like, what do we have, guys, at this point? Purpose. I think that's something that rises us up so much in our nervous system, in our happy level. Again, I know a lot of people are having issues with, just not feeling important, or what's our purpose, or did I do my purpose, or is it too late, or am I too old, or is it just like, yikes, it's just not going to happen? And for you to write this book at a certain point when you were really doing a lot of other things, making your living, being a trial attorney, and it's like, well, gosh, I'm going to try it. And again, it could be very scary. You could have, tomatoes thrown at you, that kind of thing. And we all, I think, have a little bit of that fear. Are people going to reject us? Are they going to throw something at us when we do whatever? But I think that it can be spiritual breadcrumbs, as I call them. I mean, it can be step by step. It can be a small thing that we feel that we can maybe do, but maybe we don't know if we can do it. Mm-hmm. And then we actually do it, and it's like, well, yay. Mm-hmm. Like I did that thing, and then I can do the next thing.
I agree completely with that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the fears you didn't mention is that the fear like, gee, maybe I'm not going to be very good at it, or maybe the book is not going to be good, or I'm, it's almost like a fear of failure, or a fear of mediocrity, maybe.
Fear of mediocrity. And is it also about, which I think sometimes comes up with people, it's like, well, do I have time for that? Like, am I getting myself too distracted, or should I just stay over here? Mm-hmm. Like, that's for someone else to do. That's somebody else's voice, or that's someone else to do. Mm-hmm. And for us to sometimes look and see that maybe we look out in the world, like I did this when I was a clothes designer. I love clothes, and I would look here and there, and then there was something I just couldn't find. It's like, well, I will just make it myself. And so many inventions and so many things come out of that. So it's sort of like, well, it's cool, I'll just do it because it's not somewhere else. And you had that idea of the Rendezvous event, and then you built this whole, like that was literally the hub of the wheel.
Right.
And the spokes were all the other.
And I have to tell you, when I started writing it, I had no idea where the story would go. I had no idea where it would end. I started writing it, and then as I would write a chapter or two, I think, here would be the next logical thing.
Yeah.
Or here would be the next logical step. And I'll tell you this one story. I wrote this one chapter that was very intense, and I remember being very focused on it. And when it finished, I said out loud, oh my gosh, that turned out way differently than I thought it would. I mean, the book almost started to write itself. Mm-hmm. And then I was hooked, and I just loved it. But when I started, I had no idea.
And that is sometimes the path, again, like Dorothy, she just starts, they send her on the yellow brick road. She has absolutely no idea what she's doing at all. But she just has Toto, and she just has some sort of feeling that something good is going to happen. Mm-hmm. And again, she kind of pulls her Mr. Magoo out, that's not really the order. She's before Mr. Magoo, but it's all good. Yeah. I want to also talk, I know our very talented Cody, our engineer, is telling us we have just a few more minutes, and I want to make sure that we also chat about, just briefly, about your next book. So guys, what I would love for you to do is actually go to Geoff's website, and you can also go to 60 Degrees Publishing and check out your books, your upcoming books that are going to be coming out. There are other cool books there, too. Our dear friend Michael Balker will be happy if you check it out. And so you can buy Rendezvous through there, and also on Amazon, right?
On Amazon and 60 Degrees Publishing.
Right.
It's very easy to find, and it's a terrific selection of books.
Yeah, and so, do that, guys. And then also you can check out Geoff in a few other places. Do you have a website yet?
I don't have the website up.
All right, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
So I want to chat a little bit, and we have 1 minute or so, or two, about your Hawaii situation.
Yes. So this is
You're going to another adventure.
Right. This is another book that I had stumbled across an interesting historical quirk. During the wars for Hawaiian hegemony of the islands, for the Hawaiian war chiefs fighting to seize control of the islands, it turned out there were several Europeans that were essentially shanghaied to fight with the various Hawaiian warriors on the various factions. Mm-hmm. And I thought, what an amazing piece of history that hardly anybody knows about, right? And so I've created my characters that are historically set in the correct time with the historical characters such as Kamehameha, who ultimately won. Most people have heard of Kamehameha. He actually won those battles and took control of the islands. But I have an American male, who was, emotionally badly damaged in the Revolutionary War. He sails on the first American ship that lands in Hawaii. He's marooned there. He falls in love with a girl who has her own agenda. He's pulled into these wars against his will because he's fought for years in the Revolutionary War, and it's a terrific story.
Great.
Yeah.
And that'll be coming out. And we won't say the time because we don't know. Plus, everything is evergreen. So that's why from hearing this show, you guys will go to 60 Degrees Publishing, and we'll do another show. We'll come to you. You'll be knowing about it, and we'll let you know about it. But I just wanted to let you know that because, again, in the conversation of just doing our dreams, just having just having more fun, feeling purpose and creative and alive in our life, feeling vitality in our bones, no matter if we're 5 or 95, and, get going, people. I want us to get going after COVID, and, I think it's a good idea, and you certainly have, my friend.
And I like to keep going. I hope I can do this for many, many years.
This is the next book about Hawaii, and then it'll be the next thing and the next thing, and then maybe we'll have a Netflix thing of this or whatever, and we'll be back to chat with you guys about that. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Geoff Spellberg, for coming on this show. And Rendezvous, check it out, you guys. And I just want to let you know that we are taking off because it is that time. That went very quickly, did it not?
Yes.
And I just want to remind you guys that I'm Sunny Chayes, and do something for yourself today that your future self will thank you for. So until next time, bye for now, guys. Thank you, Geoff, so much.
Thank you, Sunny, for having me.